Hello everyone, my name is Jen and welcome to a recap and review of Outlander Season 7, Episode 16, 100,000 Angels. Here we go. All right everyone, how are you doing? How was that for you? Okay, that was traumatizing, thrilling, romantic, and very confusing. And if you're like me, who is a book reader, maybe you were as confused as I was. I mean, not even to talk about people who haven't read the books, who might just be like, wow, could that be true? As a book reader, I was a bit flabbergasted at the end of that. Just nuts. Just nuts there. This episode was a little bit longer than some of the previous ones. I will say I'm just disappointed that we haven't had a couple episodes be like longer. We used to get that happening with episodes sometimes when there'd be lots of stuff to cover, and I feel like we haven't got that. I truly hope with season 8 being 10 episodes that we get some longer ones in there. Like, come on, we deserve those things. But they also did not end this season where so many of us thought that they would. And I have a couple theories about why they ended it that way. But I also am just like, come on, like, I don't know. This is one of the few episodes this season that I almost left it a little disappointed because of also some theories that I have about what the hell they're doing with the faith stuff. So yeah, but as we always do, I'm going to start with the recap part of it before I dive into the rat's nest of theories and deep diving into Reddit and Facebook groups that I did last night, because I was the other night, right? Yeah, because it's Saturday morning. I know I have been filming these on Friday if possible, right? So that I could, film it when it was fresh. But yesterday I just couldn't. I had to let my mind spin a little bit because I just wasn't focused enough to do this. We'll see how focused I even am today. I assume this is going to be very long. Like, I have no idea what it's going to be, but I think it's going to be a really long one because there's just so much. And I really wish I was having like a dialogue with you as I was doing this. But I also think that, I know I've shared this. I'm doing a read along with friends right now, and we started it January of 2024. And I didn't want to rush people to get through it in a year. So we just had the live show last week for book 7. We have the live show for book 8 in February. And I'm really interested to fully go back through this book, right? Because I've read quite a bit of book 8 in these last 2 months because I've been picking things out for these. But I know there's stuff that I missed. And I try to bring the clearest view to people who are watching both together but maybe need a reminder, or who never have read the books, to explain what things they're changing or leaving out, right? So there's that. But anywho, let's get into the recap. As always, I'm going to do the recap first with minimal kind of, like, I'm going to comment on how much I enjoyed watching it or what I didn't like, but it will have minimal comment about like how much that mirrors the book or not. I'm just going to go through it. Then I will do my comparison section where I don't know how we're going to do that, but we will. I have some notes, but I don't know how much they'll help me. And then I will give my accuracy rating and then predictions, which in this case are going to be predictions for the final season. Yeah. So anyway, let's go ahead and get into this. So this episode starts off very somber and very intense, and I will commend Stars. They did everything they could to telegraph what was coming in this, and I mean, those of us who've read the books, like, we knew what was coming as well, but I think they telegraphed it in this episode very well. There was self-harm warning. Sorry, I gotta be careful about the words that I say for YouTube. It's still pretty early in the video. But they gave a very clear warning, not only in the, like, what happens in, the rating. They say it's, like, mature content, gun, they'll say, like, gun violence, whatever. Though they did miss saying death of a pet, okay? They really could have said death of a pet, I'm just saying. But we'll get to it. We'll get to it. And then even after that, they do have the thing of, like, this has a very clear depiction of, like, I think it even says, like, a method of unaliving and, like, be prepared for that. So I very much commend you, stars, for doing that. And there was an ending way, way at the end as well that had, like, the hotline and everything. So very good job with that. I'm happy to give people that when we do. So we start our before intro scene is Jane before someone who seems like a newspaper guy, I guess. And he's there, like, trying to take her statement, trying to hear her story, trying to sensationalize it a lot, like wanting to hear, you know, why she did it, what reason it was. She stabbed him many, many times. So they're like, what are you doing? And, you know, Jane isn't showing any remorse. And that's really off-putting to the man, right? He's trying to shame her about it. And she was like, it was glorious, she says. She even says, the only thing I'm sorry about is that I couldn't kill him again. She really is, like, grinding it in that she isn't sorry. She would do it again. He deserved it. And in my opinion, I think it's very good that they didn't show this murder happen. You know, we only hear about it from when she tells, you know, William in a previous one. I think that was a good idea because we didn't need to see her in the act of doing it, because I think a lot of us do feel that she should have been able to do that, right? And that, man, if this was in different times, we maybe could have got her a lesser sentence at least than what was going to happen. But it's just, you can just see this as a woman who's like, it doesn't matter what I say. The game is ruled by men. I'm guilty of this. He had more rights than me. Like, all of those things that we just know, right? You just know. And again, this actress is so good. She's so good, you guys. I had chills. Just the way she acted, her physicality of it too, while she's listening to this guy berate her and tell her she's going to hell, like this is her last chance for whatever, and her just being like, you know, there was nothing. And the things that this young woman has probably seen, you know, in the books, it's referenced that she's probably 17, you know, like she's a child herself, right? And yeah, and so she then, you know, when he says she's damned to hell, and she's saying, like, you're the one profiting off of the misery of others. And she's like, I won't give away a single other thing to a man again. And I'm not always someone who needs to see feminine rage stuff. I'm just not. Plenty of people do. It's not that I would turn it away when I see a good scene with it, but it's not the number one thing I need to see and stuff like this. But the way that it's like, it's just like the resignation of it, that she's like, this is where I'm at. And, you know, at least my sister's out of this. And like, she's just so done with it, you know? She's just done with it. And then we have our intro. And so I haven't spoken about this, I think, in any of this season, whether last year, maybe I did the first half of the season, I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of this rendition of the Skyboat song. I don't really like the person singing it. I don't really like the vibe that it gives, though, you know, at the end of this season, I do almost, like, I see the arc of that, like, it has a lot of aching and longing and sadness in it, and there is a lot of loss that's happened, especially, you know, the end of this episode. But yeah, there was just something that there was just something about it that this time for this episode, and particularly following the scene we just saw and what's coming, I found it fit very well. And particularly what I haven't liked is the echo of the over the sea, dude. Like, I haven't liked that, okay? When it's over, like, the title card stuff, right? The title card has shown. I just haven't. I don't think it's bad. It's just, it was a shot and I haven't liked it. But this time, for this episode, like, I can understand this choice of it for the whole season, just for it to be played here, because my goosebumps were an inch high, okay? It was just, the way it sets you up to go into this episode is just wild. I also forgot to mention this. I can't remember if this came before Jane's part or if it's when we get back from the intro, but they do show that scene of a woman and two girls like frolicking through the like wheat field or the grass or whatever. And we will like revisit to that later. But I did want to mention it because we'll come back to it, and I didn't write in my notes where we saw that, but it's there. So then we come back and we have Jamie sitting beside Claire's bedside, and it's dark out still. And he's saying things to her about what she's told him about blood and how, you know, how many pints of blood they have. And he's like, you've said it's dangerous to share our blood because it could be, you know, it could be rejected. And he says, he's like, but I feel like if our blood was to intertwine, my blood would know yours, you know, and it's that written in my own heart's blood type of thing. You're the blood of my blood. So it's so, oh, it's so good. And then we have Claire saying she does mumble awake and she's like, I've decided not to die. And he's like, thank you. And she's like, it's not because it doesn't bloody hurt. It's because I know what it was like to think you were dead and I wouldn't do that to you. And he says, thank you. So sweet. And then there's just a really soft thing of like Rachel and Denny are like watching in the corner, and like Denny has his Bible open. And I know that Denny hasn't given up his faith. He isn't allowed to practice with the other friends. But I personally, like, I found it a really beautiful moment that is very understated, that he was holding his Bible and, like, praying for her right then. Again, not because he isn't a prayerful man, not because he still isn't religious, but because we haven't seen much of that from him. Like, we saw it at, like, the wedding of Rachel and Ian, but, you know, there was that scene in the last one where he's like, you know, hold tight and pray, James. That's all we can do. And it's like after he did this surgery, which, you know, we'll come back to a scene of Denny explaining, really, he explains how traumatic that was. But then even he knows, like, he did the medicine part and now he's praying for her, right? And I don't know, as a faithful person myself, I find that so moving because it is true. It's like some of the best physicians, you know that like God guides their hand, right? And particularly back then, let's be real, when you didn't have the scans to see things, like you were going in blind to situations, like what else could it be seen as, you know? Anyway, I found it very that was such a subtle thing for me to even call out, but it really struck me. Just that, like, what do they call it? The tableau of, like, you know, Rachel and Denny. So I'm going to cry a lot during this one, by the way. If you haven't figured it out yet, there's going to be a lot of crying in this one. That they were, like, giving Jamie space to, like, be by her, but they were also, like, waiting to see if she, like, made it. And I just found that very moving. It's moving. Okay, so then we switch over to the British camp, and we have William asking for John's help, and so he tells John about Jane and that she was a whore and that he still needed to help her. And one of the things that struck my mind too is I was like, you know, John's been with a sex worker a time or two in his life. And again, we didn't go full into Percy Wainwright's history, but I think I explained that in one of those, that Percy, when he like first met him, Percy was a sex worker as well. So it's not like John hasn't had his share of that, but he tells him about it. We don't know what. So he's asking his father to find out where she is and what's going on. And one of the things I want to point out, like, all of this stuff is happening like pretty quickly together, right? So like it was the battle like yesterday, and the way things like worked out with this is, well, maybe not yesterday. It's been like a couple of days, but he got, you know, back from, like, John and Ian rescued him. He gets back and finds out that she's been taken away from Francis, and all that's happening very close together. I'm only pointing that out because the timeline's very different in the book, and I actually think the timeline in the show makes a little more sense for timeline wise, and I'll explain why when we get to that part. So this is one of the things I want to commend the show for, is that yes, it's not all happening night after night. We do have, we see Claire getting better, but it's all happening pretty close together, right in here. So he's telling his dad. Then we have Ian returning, right? So Ian gets back and says, we were able to rescue William. He's with John. It's good. And they tell him that Claire was hurt and that she's going to make it, but they tell each other that. And okay, so then we go back to William and John has went and found some information out, and he tells him that she signed a confession. She admitted to it. They're holding her at I think it's did they say it was at a schoolhouse or a different place, or can't remember where they said, but everything's under martial law right now, so there's not even going to be a trial. She signed the confession, so they don't need to have a trial, so she is going to be hung. And John does ask him, he's like, do you love her? And he's like, well, I wanted to protect her. So he's not really like answering it. And to be fair, like, I don't think there's anything wrong for that. Like, I think he could have really grown to love Jane, in my opinion. But I do also understand that, like, at first he just wanted someone he could help, right? And he's felt very helpless for, things that he's found out and things he can't control, and he just wanted to help someone, right? And he thought he could help these two, right? They came to him for help and he wanted to. And that's going to happen. So really a bummer. Now then we are about a week later. Oh wait, sorry. John tells him, he's like, you did save her sister. So that gets pointed out, like, you saved someone. And we're like, for now, what's going to happen? Okay, now we've skipped ahead like a week, and we see that Claire's getting a little better, getting a little probably more anxious being in bed, and she actually needs to go to the bathroom. And so she tries to get Jamie to get, her bucket and then, like, leave her. And he's like, you've helped me with much worse things. Like, I'm going to help you. And he's like, if I leave you, you're just going to fall over. It's not going to be good. So, yeah, very nice little awkward, but also very, like, I don't know. Maybe we haven't all, I don't want to say that, but a lot of us have been in a position where we've needed someone to help us with something embarrassing at some time, I mean, just in October was when I had my horrible, like, back issue, and thankfully my dad didn't have to help me with, like, bathing or anything, but also I didn't take a bath for, like, 10 days. I had to, like, just self-clean, and then I eventually was taken to my gym so I could get in a shower that I could walk into. I didn't have to climb over it because I couldn't do that. Anyway, again, I didn't need help with, like, any intimate things, but I almost did. I almost couldn't get off the toilet sometimes, right? So anyway, sorry, just a bit of anecdote. But even, they're the closest two people can be together, and she's still a bit embarrassed about it. And then she wants to see her urine because she wants to make sure there's nothing wrong with her, like, kidneys, I think, or whatever. And it's nighttime, so she's like, just save it so I can see it. And Jamie's like, let me just have you take a look at it. So he goes and gets a candle and, like, holds it over the bucket so she can look. And it's just such a sweet moment because she just, like, looks up at him and she's like, Jamie, I love you. And it's such a funny thing, like, over her piss bucket, because it's like, he gets her, it's just such a beautiful moment, right? And especially because they haven't even still had too much time to the fact that, like, to process that she thought he was dead and then is back, because all this stuff with John and then getting pulled back into the war. And so to just look at this man that she's loved for so long, that he would know that she would be thinking about that until the morning light. And he's like, let me just have you look at it so then you can get a good night's rest. And then she asks him to get in bed beside her because she just wants him there. She's really cold, and sit with her. And she brings up some weird elephant facts, which is totally her. And then she asks, can we go home? And he says, we're going to go home. As soon as you can travel, we will. So then we have a very interesting scene. And as I said, I'm not going to make book comparisons till we get to that part. So I'm just going to tell you what happens here. We have a nighttime visitor of Master Raymond, which, by the way, I want to say, love that we got the original actor back, okay? I am not mad about, like, seeing him. I was like, oh my gosh, look. a flashback all the way from like season 2. Wonderful. Love it. And he like says hello to her, calls her Madonna like he always used to. And he says, it's not time yet for us to see each other. Because I think she mentioned, she's like, I was thinking of you, you know, and she's remembering, I didn't bring this up, but we're seeing a couple of flashbacks to her time in La Hôpital, I'm not French, the hospital of like the angels, right? Or whatever, the poor hospital that she worked at in France or in Paris. And she was saying like she's thought of him. And he's like, it's not time for us to be together yet. He also said he came to ask forgiveness. And she says, for what? And he says, someday you'll know. Very ominous. Very ominous. Anyway, then we have her waking up. And she asks Jamie if he had seen anyone. He's sleeping in a chair over there. He hasn't. They have a little moment remembering faith together. Which I've said this before, when they have the moments like, that happens in the books at least once or twice a book. They will have a moment of like, oh, she would have been this old, and, you know, she would have been the older sister of Bree and William, and, you know, all these things. And, you know, Jamie says something that knowing that you'll see your loved ones again is what makes death nothing. Right? And he says it makes death bearable because, you know, it's just going to be, I mean, and fully, James Fraser fully like believes that, right? His faith is very important to him. It doesn't get brought up constantly, but he fully believes that, right? And along with when he gets glimpses of his loved ones, you know, before battle, or when he's calling someone to him to help him with something, you know, to him, he believes that one day, like, that will be him, and you'll get to be with those people. So we're remembering faith together for a moment here. Then we go to 1739, and we have Buck and Roger kind of, like, leaving Lollybrock again. I think that's where they were going, or whatever. They're leaving there, and they're just kind of mumbling back and forth, and all of a sudden we see Jem at the end of the road. It's such a good scene, you guys. It's such a good scene. It feels so good. And my favorite part of this is first he sees Jem and he's like, oh my God, we found you, right? So he's thinking in the moment, like, this is like, he's here. We found him. Like, oh my God, this is what we've been doing. But then he mentions, like, he's like, where have you been? And he's like, I was with Mandy. And he's like, wait, what? Mandy's here? And then you see Bree and Mandy coming. The actual shout of joy that he does when he sees Brianna. Like, I'm not going to scream at this right now, but the way he, like, yells her name, the full, like, joy on his face and the happiness of, like, his wife is here and his kids are here is so beautiful. It's so great. But I love that he just shouts it full out, her name, and, like, runs to her. And it's so beautiful. Like, I don't even care. I don't care. There's a lot of unhappiness in this episode. And that, like, pure joy of that moment is so, it hits so good. And then when he's like, tell me this is real. And Buck is like, it's real. That's directly from the book we'll talk about later. But just feels like they've been apart for a bazillion years, and just with the tiny little clips we've been getting of them, like I said, I still stand by, I wish that their story had mostly been in one episode, or maybe like two, not two whole ones, but maybe we'd kept that way, but either way, they're back together, and we'll come back to them in a moment here. But first, we go to 1778 again, and Lord John Grey is stopping by to see Claire, and Jamie is being very territorial. I wrote down here, I said, calm down, Daddy. I don't care. I was feeling sassy because John is just checking in, and, you know, they have a fondness for each other now that's not going to go away. And it doesn't have to do with the fact that they did the Devil's Tango, which neither of them really remembers. They just know that they did. It's that they both shared something that nobody else can fully understand, right? And he saved her. Like, he did. Some bad things really could have happened to her. And who knows, maybe she would have left by the time, because Jamie was dead for a good amount of time to her, right? So we've said, like, what if she had went back and we, she thought he was dead before and things went one way, So, but John says we saved each other. So yes. But we don't mention William in this scene, which I thought was a little bit weird to me. Then we have the little scene with Denny that I foreshadowed where he comes up to talk to Claire. And we finally get one of the last clips from the intro that we hadn't seen yet with her opening the windows of the church. And it is cool because throughout this episode, I didn't mention this, but throughout this episode, it gets turned back into the church as they're getting ready to leave. You see part by part, like first most of the beds are gone, and then later like the windows are open, unboarded, and then later the pews are back by the time they leave. So I thought that was really cool. But Denny mentions like how hard it was to do surgery on a loved one, which is not only him like openly saying that he loves Claire, this is family to him, he loves her. And it's very interesting because of course she's not going to bring up the rules of things back where she's from, but that's the reason why you don't do surgery on your loved ones. But she does say, like, I've had to heal them before. And I mean, she hasn't done a full surgery like he said, but she definitely has been working on it. She's worked on pretty much everybody at some point. I mean, she's cut them all open at some point for different things. But yeah. So then 39 at Lollybrock, and we have Brian and Brianna meet for the first time. I didn't write down every single thing that they said to each other. It was a really beautiful scene though. He definitely mentions how much she looks like his wife, and we actually have her like looking at the picture of Ellen again. And so that was very interesting. Nice little moment of them together. And I just think that's so special. I really do. I love that they get to have that scene. It's great. We'll talk about what really happens in the book when they meet, but I like that scene there. Okay, so then we go to 1778. Oh boy, here we go. William asks for Jamie's help with something that's life and death. And Jamie takes a whole 10 seconds to decide, and William's gonna go, and he's like, fine, I don't need you. And he's like, if you could really do it yourself, you never would have come to me. And so he goes in and tells Claire, my son needs me, and she's like, well, go. So Jamie and Willie go to save Jane, and they notice there's only like one man guarding the place where she is. And we did see a scene of Jane standing at the window drinking from a bottle of alcohol. Her wrists are in manacles, and she's just standing at the window looking at the sky. She like waves at it a little bit. Very interesting. But then we have Jamie and Willie break in, and they get there too late. And Jane has slit her wrists with the broken bottle. And it's very hard to see. It's very hard to see. And again, I think the show did such a good job making you care about Jane so quickly. I don't feel the same way about her in the book as I did in the show, right? It's a tragic thing, and it changes Willie in ways. Sorry, I keep saying Willie because William's too stuffy to me. He's Willie in my head, but he is changed by this, and we'll see how later, but it also is like, again, they made me care about Jane very quickly is my point. And so that death and the potential of what it could be, in truth, it's not like he lost a great love or a fiance or a child, but there was that like squandered potential, and the fact that this world just let Jane down. And Frances too. It's really let them down. And Jamie takes a lock of her hair, and he says, for her sister, always thinking ahead. And they have to leave because someone's coming, and Willie just says, like, I wanted to save you, Jane. Please forgive me. And he has to leave her there. So then the next day, we have William bring Fanny to the church, which that was the thing. I was like, where has this girl been staying this whole time? We'll get into that. And he brings her to Jamie and Claire, and Jamie makes the oath that he's going to take care of her and keep her safe, and that she's welcome to stay with them. And then she says that she wants her sister. She's like, I need to see her, because they're going to bury her. And he's like, we're gonna do that. Then we have a scene of Jamie and William, and William says, tell me about my mother. I think I'm owed to learn that, or I deserve to know about that. And Jamie says, no, you don't deserve to know that about how it was. And again, we'll talk about this full scene of the book, how it's a bit different, but he says, you want to know, did I force her? And did I love her? And no, and no. And then William is like, I've heard that she was impulsive and that she was this and that and rash. And I love that Jamie says this. He's like, did they tell you that she was courageous and that she was bold? And, that she was one of the, strongest young women that he'd ever met, right? And because William points out, he's like, I know that my father, the Earl of Ellesmere was in his 60s. I'm not stupid. And Jamie's like, I get it, and he's like, were you with her after she was married? And he's like, I would never do that to anybody. So figure it out, right? So of course he's not going to tell him the details. I love that about Jamie. Again, we'll talk about the slight differences in that. But then Willie asks, he's like, are you sorry for it? And he's like, she was young and I was twice her age, and it's my fault what happened. But no, I'm not sorry for it. And he, touches William's face, and William says, right, looking in his eye, he's like, I will never call you father. And I say, you'll never call him father yet, because time is long. Okay, so then we skip to the graveyard, and in the show version of this, they've already buried her basically in a pauper's field. And so many people have been buried because after the war, you can't even tell which gravesite is Jane's. And, and I understand that, we can say it'd be very grim for a little girl to see this, but in all reality, sometimes you need to see the death to fully believe it's real. That is why a lot of times there are, wakes and vigils, is because some people need to see that. And she doesn't get the chance to do that. So Claire goes and sits down by Fanny, and she's like, my sister won't even be in heaven because what she did is, what will God say, basically? And Claire says, she's like, I think God will understand the circumstances. And so anyway, she asks her, tell me a good memory about your sister. And so I believe, the memory she tells then is that one of the, mom and the two girls running, I think, is kind of that memory. And then there is a locket that she has that has the name of their mother and a picture inside, and the name of her mother is Faith. All right, everybody. All right. Okay. So then we skip to Ian and Rachel in bed together, and they're talking about their options. He's like, do you want to go back to the ridge? It's safer than being a farmer, but he's like, I wouldn't have to kill anyone except bears and things like that. And she's like, is it a good place for us to raise our family? And she tells him that she's pregnant. And it's a really beautiful moment because we know how special that is for Ian, and there's just this new hope for the next generation of them. But with the new life coming, there's also a goodbye that we have to say. And the next morning when Ian wakes up, Rollo doesn't get up with him. And I gotta tell you guys, I knew this was coming. Even me and my friend, I was like, oh my gosh, we're gonna lose Rollo this season. Rollo's gonna be gone. And I know the show hasn't showed the dog very much in, honestly, the last seasons. We see him very rarely now, just because, having a dog on set is really difficult, everyone will tell you, but still, we know it's Ian and Rollo. Like, that's our pair. Like, that's our men, you know? That's their pair. And to lose him is just, like, really hard. But he points out, he's like, I think he was waiting. He was waiting until I had you. And that's really special. And so he's like, I'm gonna go and bury him. And she's like, I'm coming with. And he's like, no. She's like, I married him as well as you. So we have to do this together. Then we go to 1739, briefly, for Roger and Bree to go back and forth. He and her, you can tell they were talking about the fact that he saw his father. And she's like, I kind of was hoping I was going to see mine. And of course she's referencing Jamie, but Jamie is in France, and he's like, we could wait for him. And she's like, or we could go see him, you know? And they're deciding, do we go back to 1980? We have a life, or do we stay here? Now, one thing I will say, I wish they did point out the fact that if they went back to 1980, there's some murderous buffoons trying to get them. We don't discuss that at all. And as I've said, that really bugs me that we just drop that. Like, from when she's just lollygagging around Lollybrock, getting, you know, the message from him, and then there's no one chasing them when they leave, which I mentioned. They get basically chased out of 1980. And then them not even mentioning that these goons are, like, waiting for them when they would come back, you know? So, and nobody believes them about it, right? So we don't even, like, talk about that. But anyway, so they're hinting at the fact that they're probably going to go to Claire and Jamie again. Because Mandy's heart is better, so there's no reason why they, like, can't, right? So then we have a final scene, and this is the one, right, that is the mind fuck for everybody. Pardon my language, but it's true. And that is that they're getting ready to leave. They're all packed up to go, and Claire's looking for Fanny, and she goes into the church, and she hears a song being sung that came out in 1905 or something. That song was written, but I mean, from what I looked into, I think it was 1905. Either way, it's in the 1900s, nowhere near this time, and Fanny is singing that song in the church. And so we have Claire walking through it, and then we flash to the scene of she sang that song to her dead Faith, her stillborn Faith, who didn't have eyelashes yet, or really fingernails, and was less than 5 months, and is blue, okay? Just a reminder, she was blue, okay? Blue. And so then we have her ask Fanny, where did you hear this song? How could you know this? Okay. And Fanny says, my mother would sing it to me. So we pair that with the fact she has a locket and says her mom's name was Faith, and she's singing this song. And what does Claire walk up to Jamie to say? And what does our cliffhanger for season 7 leave us on? But her saying, I think Faith lived. And then we and again, if you're like me, you were like, what? What is this? Is this true? Is this real? What's going on? Okay. So we're going to get into that. I'm going to pause this. I need to go blow my nose and get ready because we're 40 minutes in and we still got a lot to go. Like, kick up your feet. We're getting ready for it. But that was the end of season 7, which is just crazy. Okay, so, sorry, I shifted just a little bit. We'll see how long that lasts before the sun bugs me again. All right, so we're going to go through some of the smaller changes and differences first before we get to what that bomb drop was. Because I will tell you, when I finished this book, I've shared this, I don't know what I've said it. So, of all of the pretty books in the big books here, I have only read Bees once. I've only read Bees once. Everything else I've read at least 3, with this being either the 3rd or 4th time for certain books I'm rereading, okay? Even with that, y'all know just from these, I am not a perfect encyclopedia for this. There's stuff that I forget. There are plenty that people correct me in the comments about. Even with all that I know, there are plenty of things I don't. And so I was like, I don't remember that plot line of Faith possibly being alive existing. There are, again, we'll get into it. This isn't completely pulling it out of their ass, but I do have questions. But we also have been kind of told that, like, this is gonna, like, season 8 is gonna have both stuff for book 9 and then also end the series. And people wobble back and forth about what that means. Are they gonna cover book 10 and Diana's gonna tell them secrets of book 10, or what's it gonna end with? Is she gonna tell them how it ends? But not, I mean, obviously not everything. Her books are way too, they already skip a lot when they do them, but will they end it the same way? Will we have a Game of Thrones situation where she told like what's gonna happen, right? So all of those things. But this just fascinates me because I'm like, there's only been the barest hint in book 9 about this faith theory, which again, I'm going to get into them. There's just the barest hint of this faith theory in the books. So my question is, are we pulling this forward because that is where Diana means it to go, but she has a whole other book to pull that through? Or, like, are they going to change something so there's this huge, like, knot of things that happen? I don't know. Anyway, we'll get into my theories first. But first, I just want to go through quickly the changes and differences and stuff, and then we'll get into that scene. So I did look up Rollo. I looked up the death of Rollo to just see where that was. And one of the main differences, too, that I talked about is that Ian and Rachel don't get married before this battle. And Rollo actually dies I think just a few days, not a few days I get, but just a little ways after their wedding that he dies. But some of the big things is, so after the war, after this battle, Ian was also injured. So both Ian and Claire are injured. And William actually goes AWOL during the battle to go and find the girls because of stuff that's happening there. And yeah, and then, so he's still slowly healing from that. And while he's healing is like when they get married. And as I've said, both Dottie and Denzel, and then Ian and Rachel, they get married like at the same time. So there's that. And then while William is off looking for the girls, he ends up running into a situation where he hears that. And again, please don't nitpick this to death. It was very difficult to pick all of this stuff out here because this is super confusing. But William is trying to find the girls, but then he also gets sidelined with word of his cousin Ben, right? So Ben is also one of Hal's sons, which we haven't heard about. And he throughout this is trying to find him. So when we have some scenes of him, he's looking for him. Okay, where are we at? Sorry, where did I write this all? Because, anyway, where is this? Okay, yes. So he's trying to find Ben, and he was told that Ben was killed as like a traitor or something like that, I think, or a spy. Ben was killed as a spy or something like that. And so he's told where Ben is buried. And it's a very weird thing because William actually decides to dig up Ben because he wants to get a lock of hair for his mother, is what he says. And it's a good thing he decided to do that because when he gets to the body, he discovers that it's not Ben. It is a thief who's been buried in his place. So Ben's not dead is what we assume from that. That comes back up later, and I'm just going to tell you where it ends up here because I don't believe we're going to have this storyline at all. But we discover Ben is dead, and then William doesn't have a chance to, like, the stuff with the girls ends up happening, and he ends up asking for Jamie's help with that. And he hasn't had a chance to, like, tell his uncle that, like, Ben isn't really dead. And they hear this rumor about this woman named Amarantha Amaranthus Gray. And they're like, who is this? Is this a made up person trying to like whatever, blah, blah, blah. There's a whole storyline with it about it. But at the very end of this book, John and Hal find this Amaranthus Gray, and she has a son named Trevor. And Amaranthus, who believes she's a widow, tells Hal, I am your daughter-in-law, and this is your grandson, Trevor. So that's why, too, it's super significant discovering that Ben's not dead, because where is he? And also he has a wife and child now. And Hal and John think that, I believe they think that Ben's dead. What chapter is that one in? Either way, they find this Amaranthus Gray, and she's like, he is... Yeah, it says, Benjamin is dead, your grace, but this is his son, and if you don't mind, we should quite like to come with you. So, anyway, and then they don't go and get Fanny, or wait, where am I at? They don't go to get Jane until, like, that stuff is happening. Sorry, I have so many notes about this, but anyway. Also, there's a lot of time that's passed in here, too, to mention. We have some more stuff with Benedict Arnold and Peggy we run into. Yes, we have William find out about Ben. Then, again, I've shared this. They're not staying in this church in the books. And 3 months time passes before they start to, like, get ready to go back to the Ridge. Like, it's a long time because Claire's healing. And also... Jamie's still trying to get his printing press, and they're with Fergus and Marcelly and the kids. Marcelly's pregnant with number 5, and there's a fire, and Germaine is trying to throw Henry Christian to safety, and he slips and dies. So we lose baby Henry Christian dies in the book there. And that will lead to, I'm skipping again ahead a bit here, that by the end of the book, Fanny is going to go with them to the Ridge, and Germaine is coming too, because he, number one, is feeling very, very guilty about what happened. He's blaming himself for his brother's death, because they used to do like little tricks together and fun things, and he would throw Henry Christian and they would do tumbles and stuff, and in this heightened moment, like, he threw him at the wrong time, and Henry Christian, being so much smaller, like, he died right in front of everyone. Like, it was gut-wrenching to happen, okay? But anyway, Germaine and Fanny are going to end up going back to the Ridge with him. Now, the other thing, too, so the stuff with going to get Jane, that happens almost exactly the same. Like, if he first asks his father about it, and then when he can't do something, then he asks for Jamie's help, and they go to get her. All of that same way happens. Kind of the big difference is that they do have a funeral for Jane. She isn't already buried, and they have a funeral for her, and all of the Frasers, both Fergus and Marcelly and family, as well as Jamie and Claire and Dottie and Denzel, they are all there for Jane's funeral. And I just thought that was very special, because this woman who had no one to be there for her has a full, like, family there for her funeral, and I really wish we'd had that. I know we couldn't have had Fergus and Marcelly because we've forgotten that they exist and would, you know, be living nearby, because that's where their town, you know, whatever. So yeah, there's that stuff. Let's see what other, okay, let's cover the Bree and Roger stuff real quick. So as I've said before, we've mostly covered, like, all of the Bree and Roger stuff there is to cover pretty, like, quickly, and we're just, like, waiting. We changed the stuff with where Bree went. Like I told you in the books, she takes the kids to America for a couple months until it's time for the winter solstice, and then she goes back to Scotland just right before the winter solstice. And when they're on the way to leave, like, Rob and his cronies are literally chasing them down. And there's Lionel Menzies, who actually helps them escape. Like, he gives them a gem, and Bree is saying, like, we're going to find Daddy. Think about Daddy. We're going to go to Daddy. And they go through. So the scene is still the same, where they find each other. But one of the things that's different is Bree and the kids go to Lollybrock first to kind of find, where to find Roger. And when they see Brian for the first time, Brian thinks that she's Ellen and thinks that Jem is Willie, because that's what they looked like when they died. At different times those two died, but Jem looks just like Willie and Bree looks like Ellen, and Brian actually faints when he sees her. So there isn't really a big discussion that those two get to have because he faints. And then, she doesn't end up talking with him like too much or anything. Okay, so that's really how that's different. And then where they decide to go to and all of that, we didn't get to that part. So that's the thing that I put in here. I will show. We actually don't cover the last part of the book. We still have part 9 left of book 8. We stop before that. So I don't even want to tell you now fully what Bree and Roger are doing, though I have alluded to it this whole season because I was sure that's where we were ending this season. But we don't. We end it with the weird Fanny thing. Okay, so now when we're almost an hour in, we got to get into some of this, okay? And we will to the best of my ability. So the things that we changed a lot, just to mention this, is Fanny can't even sing in the book. Like, to be clear, she has a issue. I can't remember if it's like with her cleft palate or whatever. She has something that is connected with skin that Claire actually has to do a tiny like surgery on to correct. She can't speak. She has a really strong lisp. Like, it's very hard to understand her. So she ain't humming any 1900 song, okay? There is a locket and her mom's name is Faith. Which again, we'll get into that, but like, she can't sing. We also don't have Master Raymond coming to visit her in the book. That doesn't happen. It's not that Claire never thinks of him sometimes, sure, but there's never a dream sequence where she remembers him or he apologizes to her or anything in this anyway. Again, I'm speaking for what I know about book 8. I don't remember hardly a thing about book 9. So that's what I know thus far, and I'm going to tell you some stuff I researched, but that's what I know. Then, just a few other things we've left out. We've left out characters. There's no Dottie, there's no Hal, there's no Ben, and there's no Amarantha or Trevor. Don't have any of those characters in here. We don't have Fergus and Marcelly and children around. We don't have, the loss of one of the kids, which I get. We've had enough losses in this, like, that's all right. So we have all those things. So we end basically at part 8 of book 8. There's still part 9 in this as well. But we end with, we're on the way back to the ridge, is basically where the show is ending, right? They're about to head back. But it ends with her saying Faith is alive. Or maybe Faith lived. And when we're paired with that weird memory she has of Master Raymond asking for forgiveness for something, he's like, you'll know soon. Of course, we're supposed to think, well, like, was Faith, like, saved somehow? Now, one of the things I think they leave out a little bit of the show is that there have been a few times where the healing Claire is able to do almost feels miraculous. There specifically is a time in the book where she helps deliver a baby and the baby is surely, like, dying, and she's able to resuscitate the baby with more, it seems, than just mouth to mouth or things. So there's some of these hints that like it's possible to save like a baby who's barely alive. I don't know. Also in the books, there's a thing that many people referenced as evidence, because again, I went on to Reddit because I was like, I don't remember this. Once I was looking on Reddit, I do remember there is a part in book 9 where Claire asks Ian on his truck, because Ian becomes I think he's an Indian agent again in book 9 or something like that. And she's like, while you're traveling, can you look into if there was a woman named Fanny, like look into the parents of Fanny and Jane. But he never ends up finding anything, and we're just supposed to like let it go. Now that's as far as we are into that in the books that are out. So this is where I'm saying that what do the showrunners know that we don't? What has Diana told them about where things are going to go in the last book, so that if they want to end close to what she's doing, they maybe have to start sowing those seeds now? Is she going to bring back some stuff of Master Raymond in book 10? Is it going to be brought up more about, is this fit, or was this just wistful thinking? What is it? And one of the Reddit things I found, which I'm not saying I believe this, okay? I personally think that what the show is doing with that was a bit of a switcheroo, is what I'm thinking. Because again, they had already like written most of this season when they found out they were getting that full like final season. And this isn't confirmed anywhere. This is just general speculation. I think that if we had ended here, we would have had that one final scene of Bree and Roger and the kids showing up, the way that book 8 ends, as I said, and we would have ended it. I still think they should have ended season 7 here because we deserved something happy after like what we've just been through and everything. But I believe, and what I think some others believe, is that when they know they're getting that last season, they wanted to do a Cliffy to still keep people going. Because it's like, if everyone has it, HER, people are going to stop watching. Whatever. People are going to stop watching for whatever reason. They're going to stop watching it. And I believe that they changed that last scene. Not that they just whole cloth made up what they were going to do about Faith. I think they were still going to go down that track of this mystery, possibly. Because there's not been a ton of magic in the series but the time travel lately. So you gotta throw some in there. I think they changed that last scene to be a cliffhanger scene instead of a like HEA scene to leave us on a gasp, right? One last big Cliffy for the last Droughtlander that we have. There we go, right? I think that they did that. Again, I'm not saying they still weren't gonna do this storyline, but that could have been the end of an episode later on. So I think when we do the first episode back, that maybe the pre-credits will be them showing up I don't know, maybe. But yeah, because it just felt weird to me with the 3 scenes of Bree and Roger that we didn't have like the coda at the end of them showing up on the ridge. We just have them saying, when are we going to go? And we didn't finish that out. We've just, everybody's aghast at where the season ended. But now if you look where the cliffhanger for Bree and Roger is, we didn't do anything with them either. They were just left in 1739 and they're going to be stuck there until we come back from Droughtlander. So there's that. So, okay, anyway, I'm all over the place with this. I know, I can't help it. So, the very small seeds of, what do I think? Do I think this is just a red herring thing? I know when I remember my feeling in the book when there was this weird thing. I don't think that she could be alive. Now, again, in the book world of it, we haven't had a visit from Master Raymond. There's just this very thin thing of her saying her mom was Faith, and about like what her age could have been. Like, we don't know any of that. And again, there's no song, right? The show puts more compelling evidence in place with that song. That doesn't happen in the books. In the books, it's just the locket saying Faith, and I think maybe a description of what the mom looked like. Like, maybe she has some Fraser features. Could be what, I don't know. Not that red hair is only the Frasers, but whatever. Usually if there's people with red hair in them, it's Frasers in the series, but whatever. So I think the show put more compelling evidence in place than exists in the books, okay? Especially when it's all in one episode, where we already have her thinking about Faith because of a near-death experience. Then we have Master Raymond visit and say that he is sorry and you'll know soon enough and blah, blah, blah. Then we have finding out that the girl's mother is Faith. And then we have Fanny singing the song that is from the 1900s. Again, I think someone said it's 1905 is when it was Raymond. Either way, it's a contemporary song to Claire, like when that would have been. And so how is Fanny singing it and saying it was from her mom? So those are all of the evidence the show put into one episode, okay, which will feel like a lot. And it just leaves us wondering. But the things I put back in place of this is that the baby was very premature. She didn't even have eyelashes yet. She probably never even did breathe when she came out. If she did it, there wasn't the same thing to heal. Like when Claire miraculously saved said baby, the baby had everything it needed to live. She just gave it some air and it was there, right? So I think that it's a huge stretch if she were to be alive. And I don't like how the show added more evidence to this unless and until a book shows me that level of evidence. I don't believe that. And so I don't love that they did that and will now add all this speculation in that we have to deal with. Now, is that good for business? Hell yeah, it is. Because you're going to have people chomping at the bit for that final season to get an answer to this. Like, how could this stillborn child have lived, possibly been taken care of by Master Raymond, possibly have had 2 children? Now, a few other things in here. If this had been Faith as their mother, how fucking twisted would that be? That she lived only to then give birth to 2 girls who both ended up in a brothel alone, and Faith already being dead. What good does that do to the story? Because if she was these girls' mother and she lived, she's still not alive now. Like, she's not alive now, unless there's more traveling going. Like, what? Very strange. There are, again, you can go dig this up for you. There's plenty of people who think of characters that could be Faith, like people making comparisons. There's people at a time who thought Amaranthus was Faith. A whole big thing. But then it also adds in, okay, if those girls are Faith, then William had sex with his niece because he would be Faith's half-brother and he would have had sex with his niece. I just don't see, I guess she implied that, Roger and Buck have both kissed women from their family in when they've been in the past or whatever, but still, that would be very twisted. And also, I just don't see the point. And if it had been her, she's dead now for sure. So either she was peacefully dead as a stillborn who never was, and was cruelly taken away from her parents and all of that, or she did live, possibly was cared for by Master Raymond, but then ended up separated from him and lived a life to lose her life later and have 2 children end up in sex work. Or, the little one was almost in sex work. So, don't think that's great. What else? There was another point I wanted to touch on with this. I think those are the main ones of it. But I just don't think okay. The other, more promising theory to mention. So, someone also brought up the thing, what if there had been twins? And in the scene when Master Raymond sneaks into La Capitale's, and what we believe is he's getting an infection or something out of her womb, because he touches her and manipulates and takes something out. And we, the reader, both and Claire, think that was maybe the placenta, and it was rotting away inside of her. But he does use some healing on her. That's when she sees the birds, and he tells her, picture your man. You need to live. But it is a very, painful scene when she's expelling what's, in her. There's, So it's was there a twin? And, yeah. But, again, the twin would have still been just as underdeveloped as Faith had been. And also, I don't even think Faith then would have been the size that she was. Because, again, Claire was at, I believe, 5 months is what she was at. So again, magic can do anything, but that is, in my Reddit searching, the only little rabbit trail I saw where someone saying, well, maybe it was a twin of Faith. But then why was Faith named, why was Faith named after, if it was the twin, why was it Faith when Faith was the one they buried? Now, one other thing that I thought of is, what if their mother wasn't Faith, but what if she was another child who had been of a prostitute that Mother Hildegard had named? But instead of that child being dead, the mother had abandoned it there. What if she calls the children Faith who are born there, right? That's what I think. This is my thing. Because what if that's just what Mother Hildegard does, right? We know she buries her dogs there. She sometimes, buries the children there that don't have anyone to love them, who technically shouldn't be buried in hallowed ground or whatever. And she does that. What if, prostitutes have abandoned babies there and she names them all Faith? Maybe. That's my theory that would be more realistic. Now the part of her singing the song. And again, this isn't a part of the books that she sings. I'm going to answer what I think the show could say. Now, why would it have to have been Faith who sang that song? Because, let's be real about this. Even if Faith was alive, she was a day old. How's she going to know that song? That makes no sense at all. But I understand how in a moment Claire has seen all these little things and then is jumping to that, right? That's why the cliffhanger is right there. She says, she's alive. And Jamie gasps and it leaves. Like very quickly, Jamie can talk her down from this and say these things, right? But it just leaves us to have to wait with it, right? That's how TV shows work, right? Whereas for me, as soon as you get over the gasp, I'm like, well, it wouldn't even make sense because for all the reasons that I don't think the stillborn child Faith was alive, how would she have known that song to pass on to her daughter? To me, there is more likely case because we know there's travelers coming out the wazoo. Why couldn't someone else have sung that song and the mom heard it and shared it? Or if we want to make it so it's connected back to Claire singing the song, what if one of the women taking care of people there heard her sing it and then sang it to a little girl there who then was Faith who passed it on, right? We're still like jumping all over, but the show makes you do that because there's just no way. If you think about it logically for 2 seconds, it falls apart. And we can add the magic in. They may do that. They may say, well, because magic, that's how. Sure, absolutely could be true. But it doesn't take a rocket scientist in this case. Sorry, that's the wrong thing. But it doesn't take, a scholar of this to figure out that we know multiple people travel. Like even just in our family, we have all of these. What's to say there isn't someone who traveled after the year 1905 who knew that song and sang it somewhere and someone heard it and passed it on, right? So yeah, who's to say that song doesn't end up getting, maybe it was actually written further back and someone who traveled heard it, went forward and made it a song. Like when you have time travel, you can dance all of those things around to make whatever you want it to be, right? So I could ramble on about this for hours. I'm very much looking forward to our discussions down below. I'm very much looking forward to book clubs that we still have this year. This is the book we're reading right now, so we can get into stuff that just happened in the show. And then we'll be reading book 9 in February, March, and April, and we'll be able to discuss those more in depth. But we're over an hour with this, and I could just run us in circles here. Let's finish up a bit with my rating, which is way late in here. This one, guys, I've been very nice to this year. I'm going to give this one like a 6.5 to a 7. There are a lot of things that are catching up to us in this one, right? Like I have loved this season. As an overall, this half season, I would give an 8 out of 10 for accuracy. But for this, I think I'd get a 7, 7.5 for this one because there are just so many like inconsistencies now that are going on. And again, I'm a book reader first, so I'm going to compare us back to that the most. There are just so many things we've left out now that are piling up at this point, right? My notes are just filled with like, well, we don't have this character or this character or this character. So there's a lot of holes that are there. So yeah, I would give this one, we're going to round it down. I'm going to give this one a 6.5 and we'll go with that for my rating score. Now, what I think will happen. Okay, so this is more difficult. I'm going to stick with kind of the immediates. I think we will maybe open the series with us back at the Ridge. So I personally don't think this one will start up right where we left it. I think it will be one of those where we've left it off with that cliffhanger, but then we start the season with them back, and then Claire and Jamie will still be talking about this thing these months later, where she'll be like, I just feel like, and Jamie will be like, Claire, like, no, it's not. Like, I think it's going to be one of those where we jump ahead a little bit. And then Bree and Roger are arriving. I think that will happen very soon. We're going to see Willie go on a bit of a spiral. We're also going to see things ramp up with Percy, Wainwright, and John. That definitely happens. There's still a lot of games to be played with their minds right there. And then will probably, there's one battle that happens in their area of the country that Jamie has to be a part of. He has another brush with death coming, and that there's a pretty brutal death of a side character that happens in book 9. I don't know if that will happen. But yeah, we'll have the birth of Rachel and Ian's child. Will Jenny come over? I don't know. Oh, that's one final thing I want to share. So anyway, those are some things I think will happen. It's hard to fully speculate about that, but what a ride. So one final thing I wanted to mention, because I just saw this the other day. So the Outlander audiobooks are actually being redone. Now, the ones done by Davina Porter, they're not being deleted. They're not being taken away. It's kind of in the vein of like, the Harry Potter series is done by both Jim Dale and by Stephen Fry. They both have versions of it. Davina Porter is actually retired. So she actually retired prior to Bees coming out. She came out of retirement to do it. And I just saw the announcement that Outlander is coming. It's coming in April. The Outlander will be re-released. And the actress, Kristen, who plays Jenny, the new Jenny, she's going to be narrating the book. So she's going to redo all the ones Davina has done, and she will be the one who does book 10. Because again, Davina, I believe, is in her 80s at this point. I think someone said. I know she's older than Diana. And she already was in retirement when Bees came out, and she came back to do it. We don't know when Diana's will be done. We don't want to rush her with that. So we need some younger blood in. Now, I know some people will be upset with that, but also, like, we don't know Davina's life. We don't know who she is. Like, maybe she is ill, and, it could be a lot on her to take that on at this point. And the clip, like, I think Kristen's going to be really great at this, and I'm kind of excited. I'm also excited because, while I do enjoy the audiobooks, I do feel that from the beginning, the characters sound old because Davina is elderly. And there are plenty of my friends, at least, who have been barred from this series because they don't like the narrator, and they also need audiobooks to consume. So I'm very interested. And again, people will always still have Davina Porter's versions. There just won't be her version of book 10. So if you still love her, you'll be able to listen to the one she's done forever. They're not taking them away, but Kristen will be doing them on re-release, and Outlander not re-releases, because again, they're not taking away the one that's there, but will be released with her in April, and they're going to be releasing those. So just wanted to share that with you guys. But anyway, let's wrap this up. I am already dreading having to edit myself in this one. But anywho, I almost cried off all my mascara. That's always great. But thank you guys so much for still supporting these videos. I was very genuinely surprised how well these ones did for this half season. My viewership for these is always a bit rocky, how many people will want to watch them. But I do these because I adore this series, and I've reviewed, every season 1 through 4 and every episode 5 through 7, and I love them. So I think I even did season 4. I think I did seasons 1 through 3 as whole seasons. And then, I've done every episode from season 4 on. So I will keep doing this until it's done, and I hope that you enjoy it. So please make sure you like this, and if you want to find some romance recommendations for me, I have a whole playlist who does that. My light is going right now. So I love you all, and we'll see you next time. Bye.